Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Singlip-Hansen, an Education Assistant in the Education Department at IDDBA. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar with Glenda Lewis from the FDA reviewing changes in the 2022 Food Code. As always, if you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A button, and we'll attempt to answer as many as we can following the presentation. As a reminder, the recording of the information shared today will be available to members to view on the IDDBA website. If you are not a member and would like more information, please go to iddba.org under the membership tab or call us at 608-310-5000, and we'd be happy to talk to you and answer any questions. Now I'd like to introduce today's webinar presenter, Glenda Lewis. Glenda is currently the Director of the Retail Food Protection Staff in FDA's Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. Office of Food Safety has been in the Office of Food Safety and has been at the FDA since 1996. She served as a team member and then prior to her current role served for 14 years as team leader of CFSAN's Retail Food Policy Team with responsibility for leading the team in developing, revising, and interpreting regulations, model codes such as the FDA Food Code, and federal guidelines that pertain to retail-level food operations such as restaurants, retail food stores, food vending, institutional food service, healthcare facilities, schools, child and adult daycare, penal institutions, and contract feeding operations. Prior to FDA, Ms. Lewis served for 8 years with the Volusia County Health Department in Florida as an environmental health specialist. Ms. Lewis has a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and a Master of Science in Public Health from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Welcome, Glenda.
Thank you, Karen. Can everyone hear me? Yes, I hope so. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me and FDA to present and for your interest in food safety and continued work to keep food safe in the deli, dairy, and bakery segment of the industry. And I'd like to thank my team today. Let me switch the slides. I'd like to thank my team today for the work that was done in the slides that you'll see today, and just in developing, we actually authored the food code, and so hope you have any questions. Be sure to bring those up, and I'll go through several of the changes, and I just look forward to presenting to you today. And I think I'm gonna go off camera just to save bandwidth and then cover it, and then I'll come back on. So thanks so much. Okay, it's not working. Hold on, I'm trying to advance the slide. Advance. There we go. The FDA Food Code is really a key component of the President's public health focused framework for maintaining a safe food supply. It is a model code, and it does provide FDA's current thinking and best advice. So we're looking for a uniform system of provisions that address safety and protection of food within the country. The food code is a model for adoption by state, local, tribal, territorial regulatory agencies. And these are the ones that regulate more than 1 million restaurants, the retail food stores, vending operations, food service operations, and schools and hospitals, nursing homes, child cares, and facilities such as bakeries that could be in grocery stores or freestanding. So the food code and its supplement, we create this document through a coordinated and collaborative process that includes input from the stakeholders at the national level. The state and local regulators are included, federal partners, industry, and academia and consumers. And we actually do this through the Conference for Food Protection. It's a forum that meets every 2 years biannually, and they're actually meeting this year in April of 2023, just about a month, a little less now than a month away, April 24th to the 28th in Houston, Texas. But the food code also embraces the concept that our quality of life, our state of health, and the public welfare are really directly affected by how we collectively provide and protect our food. Again, as I said, it's a uniform. We're looking for uniform adoption of the food code. There are many benefits to a state or local, tribal or territorial jurisdiction adopting the code. And that's really our goal, to have it a complete adoption of the most current version of the food code. That can be used by regulatory partners so that their code can be up to date. It can provide really a more consistent and standardized approach to inspections of food establishments. If some of you are working in companies that are, across the country, maybe chain companies, you may see differences across the country when an inspector comes in. And so we're looking for that complete adoption of the food code so they can be a standardized approach to inspection. This just shows you how we develop the food code. It's sort of a visual representation of the updates of the food code. We developed the 22 food code on the right, but it's a base. The food code is developed every 4 years. And so from 2017, that was the last full edition. And then we created a supplement to that 2017 food code 2 years later. So in the interim 2 years, and you'll notice that 17 to 22 is 5 years and not 4 years. What happened there was that COVID intervened, and the Conference for Food Protection, their meeting for 2020 was postponed until August 2021. And we value their input. As I said, it's all stakeholder input into the food code. And so we changed the cycle for the food code to follow the CFP meeting. And we've come out with the 22 version. This 22 version, you also see a pretty picture there of its cover. We're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the food code this year in its current format. And so we're happy for you to join us in that celebration. And that's why I welcome so much sharing with you the information that we have in this full edition. And the focus of this presentation is going to be on the updates made to the 22 food code. We did include some of the information from the 2017 supplement so that it carried over. And we also included information from the last conference meeting, the recommendations that were accepted. There were 22 accepted and 2 partially accepted. And you can visit www.foodprotect.org to see a copy of FDA's response letter to the conference. In this version, in this version of the food code, what we've done is I go through the presentation. I'll be using the structural nomenclature of the food to present the information. So we'll be using amendatory language in today's presentation, such as add. Add means a new provision has been inserted in the food code. Or if I say redesignate, that means that we've modified a food code provision by reformatting the text of the provision into a new structural nomenclature designation. When I speak to remove, that means an existing provision is being taken out of the food code. And when I say revise, that means an existing food code provision is replaced in part or in its entirety. If you need more information on the different symbols and fonts we use and what they mean, you can refer to the preface of the food code for an explanation. And we also have a course, Decoding the Food Code, that's on our website. I can get that link to Karen to familiarize yourself within the framework of the food code. So let's look at what changed in Chapter 1. We revised definitions for certification, and there were numerous changes made in the food code to harmonize the national Shellfish Sanitation Program, their guide for the control of molluscan shellfish, and I'll refer to it as a model ordinance with the FDA Food Code. So in Chapter 1, new definitions or revisions to the defined terms were included in these terms that you see on the screen, and certification number, including all the certification and permit codes that may be found on the shellfish tag or label. we revised the definition of commingle so that it aligns with that model ordinance. And we also made changes to the definition of molluscan shellfish. We wanted to clarify that the term is inclusive of shell stock, in-shell product, and shuck shellfish. To clarify that the shell stock is live molluscan shellfish in the shell, and the shuck shellfish is the I can't say it, the shuck shellfish. We wanted to clarify that both shells of this product are removed. And this is really just a sort of a visual representation of that for you in that piece of it. And this just includes all of those, all three of those that I just mentioned. The new definition for in-shell product means a non-living processed shellfish with one or both of those shells present. When we added this category of product that we wanted to say it's available for sale, it has unique characteristics, and it really must be handled safely within the retail environment. The in-shell product is a non-viable molluscan shellfish product, one or both of the shells attached. And I'm going to speed up here. I'm thinking of the products that you might have in a dairy, deli, or bakery, and I want to make sure I cover if any of those are here in the presentation as well, where we made some changes. Intact meat, the term intact meat was amended to add cubing or pounding into the definition, and this was to clarify what intact meat means and what processes are included. Previously, the definition included a parenthesis that said including injection. It was removed in the supplement to the 2017 Food Code due to the revised revision of the term mechanically tenderized that does include injection. Here, we're being consistent with USDA, the Food Safety and Inspection Service, in their description of mechanically tenderized. This change was included in the 2017 the supplement to the 2017 Food Code, but we felt it was important to highlight in the 2015 rule, final rule titled Descriptive Designation of Needle or Blade Tenderized, Mechanically Tenderized Beef. The rule established labeling requirements for raw or partially cooked mechanically tenderized beef products. And it clarified that products that they are either injected with a marinade or a solution, they are considered mechanically tenderized. And so this change is a result of the ongoing harmonization we're doing with USDA and FSIS. In the 2017 Food Code, the definition for poisonous or toxic materials contained 4 categories. So to address a CFP issue from the 2020 conference, issue 130, number 130, we added a new 5th category. And we defined the term restricted use pesticide or RUPs as that 5th category in the definition, and just clarify that they are in fact poisonous or toxic materials. There were a couple of revisions made to the term ready to eat to align with changes made in section 3.401.13 during the 2018 conference for food protection cycle. The term at that time, fruits and vegetables, was replaced with plants. And this is a more inclusive term to include roots and grains when determining how to safely handle and hold these foods and the parameters under which they may be ready to eat. Like other food code defined terms such as food establishment or non-continuous cooking or TCS food, we include a does not include part into the definition. So the ready to eat food defined term was revised to include a does not include part to the definition. And that was really to address a new section in the food code where 3.401.15, and this is about manufacturing cooking instructions. So think, for example, commercially prepared food that bears manufacturing cooking instructions on the label, or a food that bears a disclosure that it's not been processed. to control for certain hazards. In the reduced oxygen packaging section of the food code, the term reduced oxygen packaging that was used in the section in subparagraph 2D, it's specific to cook chill packaging. That was revised to delete the phrase "which have the air expelled." So a corresponding change was also made in language in our Annex 6, which is the food processing criteria. And we think that some stakeholders may have misinterpreted the phrase "which have the air expelled" in that food code definition. So in an interpretation back in 2019, we clarified that the process of sealing an impermeable bag of hot product meets the definition, even if the air is not quote, quote, expelled in any form or fashion. So this amendment may help clarify that for cook chill packaging, the key factors that lead to ROP are present, whether the air is expelled from the bag or not. In with the tobacco products, we have a new term, actually is tobacco product. It has the meaning stated within Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and it was added to the code wherever the term tobacco was used. We replaced it with tobacco products so that to be more inclusive of practices such as vaping. This came through the Conference for Food Protection as well. And previously the term tobacco was used, but it wasn't really defined in the food code. And so now in this 22 code, the full definition now appears in Annex 3, the public health reasons. Let's look at Chapter 2, Management and Personnel. We amended subparagraphs to fix an incorrect cross-reference to 201.11. This is a section on employee health, and employees with diagnosed asymptomatic non-typhoidal salmonella should be restricted and not excluded. The cross-reference that we had to 201.12G was removed from that subparagraph to 201.11, and we placed it. And it's not so much about where it's placed in the code. The effect is that they should be restricted and not excluded. And when we had the incorrect cross-reference, it read as if they had to be excluded in that instance, and that was not the case. So we wanted to make that change in the food code. We did make some changes in 2-103.11. These are the duties of the person in charge. In this case, we added a new paragraph J, and that added person in charge duties to address any additional duty requirement for the PIC to ensure food employees are routinely monitoring food temperatures during thawing. And also remember too that thawing was amended back in 2016, the same and we sort of redesignated paragraphs and sort of moved things around when we redesignated paragraphs A and C, and I'm looking at 3-501.13 for those of you that may have a food code or maybe looking at the food code online. That's the thawing section. So we amended that via a 2016 CFP issue, and they were changed from a core to what we call a risk designation of priority foundation. Did it? Okay. We also changed in the 22 food code. Another amendment was made in the person in charge duties provision. Paragraph O, we now have paragraph O, which was formerly paragraph N, has been revised so that we have more clarity on what food allergy awareness includes. And I know in the deli, dairy, and bakery section, you probably get a lot of questions around allergens or the products that you serve. Hold on, my computer is doing something. Sorry, it kind of zoned out on me. Sorry about that. The 2020 CFP recommended FDA include specific allergy training topics under the duties of that person in charge provision. So FDA conceptually agreed that inclusion of specific topics could assist in development of operationally specific allergen training, and in further evaluation of the code provisions dealing with this. The request of training topics to be included, it really went beyond the aspects that the person in charge is required to demonstrate. So at this time, what we've done is revise the duties of the PIC to align with the demonstration of knowledge provision. And we also updated public health reasons to incorporate the CFP recommended training topics. And what we've done, you can see on the screen, the PIC, one of their duties would be to describe foods identified as a major food allergen and what are the symptoms that a major food allergen could cause in a sensitive individual. Let's look at chapter 3. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through these. I'm thinking in the deli, dairy, and bakery that you're not going to have so much shellfish product. But we did the Interstate Shellfish Sanitation Conference with harmonization. These changes to these provisions were made for the receiving, identification, handling, and maintenance of records for molluscan shellfish, as well as defining a new term that aligns with the conference. And so this is sort of a summary of the harmonization that we've done. So I want to clarify record keeping requirements, improving Annex language and context tool. And then we have marking instructions in the food code that's really a guide in Annex 7 for the inspector when the state adopts the code, and if they adopt the annexes in that part of it, they'll have an inspection form, and this gives some guidance on how to mark the inspections. So here we're just talking about the flow of the molluscan shellfish provisions. We actually rearranged and renumbered some of those provisions, and we deleted some of the information that was contained that sort of got merged into revised sections. And this change of the section numbering, we renumbered section 3202.19 was renumbered to 3202.17, and we subsequently deleted information from that. And then again, these are the shellfish, some of the actual changes that we made, and you'll get a copy of the presentation if you want to look at those more closely, or if you have questions, we can come back to those. In chapter 3, we also looked at the language again. I've mentioned before about how we've harmonized language with FSIS language going forward regarding labeling and the source of whole muscle intact beef steaks. And in that work with them, revisions were made to this section to clarify the requirements if whole muscle intact beef steaks are intended for consumption in an undercooked form without a consumer advisory. So we wanted to make it clear for folks when a muscle is whole muscle or intact, or if it's has been injected. This is I'm sorry you can't see the top of it. This is a decision tree, a tool that helps with determining that. It's sort of an intact state decision tree. Looks like, and you can find this at the web link shown on the screen. And it's really intended to help a food establishment operator determine whether a steak is intact, non-punctured, or is it non-intact. Next, we have in the food code, you may be working with companies that want to donate food, and sorry for this, that want to donate food. Oh, sorry. And we added a new subpart in the food code around food donations, and actually a new section into the food code itself. We created this so that we can be clear, there wasn't clarity around, does FDA agree with food donations or not? And FDA certainly does agree with food donations, but we've never really said that before clearly. And so we wanted to come out at this time and just say, to provide consistency and for uniformity with public health officials, that that we are in favor of food donations. We've never prohibited those or the practice of food donations, but we acknowledge that we may not have been explicitly clear on that. So in this new edition, with these new provisions added, it really indicates that food prepared, handled, stored within a food establishment in accordance with the law and within applicable provisions of the food code may be offered for food donation. So think of, and this is excess food. It's not food that's, has been served or returned back to the facility, or, but it's more if a facility has extra food that's available for donation. And we also updated in Chapter 8, the Compliance and Enforcement section 8-101-10. That speaks to public health protection, and we added the terms "and donated" to the end of that paragraph, so that the application of this code and the public health protections it provides would also extend to donated food. We had as well, we have in Chapter 3, packaging and unpackaged food and separation. And you may experience this in the deli. These subparagraphs 302.11a1 A and B call for the protection of food from cross-contamination by separating raw animal food during storage, prep, holding, and display from raw, ready-to-eat cooked food. And there's been a lot of confusion in cooked, ready-to-eat food as well. But we know now, with the introduction of ready-to-cook meals and the ingredients contained within the preparation of a meal, there was the issue of clarifying that separation of ready-to-eat food and raw animal products, that was warranted. So this provision now clarifies that ready-to-eat food may be combined with raw animal food when combined as ingredients for future prep or future cooking. So we wanted to make that distinction, and we made the corresponding changes within the food code as well. Here in section 302.15, it speaks to washing of fruits and vegetables. We amended it to include a reference to the use of produce wash testing devices. Toxic or undesirable residues could be present in or on the food if the chemicals used for washing purposes are unapproved or applied in excessive concentrations. So unless otherwise stipulated in 21 CFR, it's 173.315, the chemicals used to wash or peel fruits and vegetables should not exceed the minimum amount required to really accomplish the intended effect. They need to be accurately tested for proper concentration, and they must adhere to any indications as dictated on the product label. So the provisions, when you see this, we put a note here that the provisions in this paragraph is written in italics. That means that it's not a requirement, it is an exception and an alternative means for compliance. So using produce washes is not a requirement of the food code. You can use just running water to wash produce, but if you use those, then you would need to follow the language that's in the food code. We also included, CFP requested a reevaluation of the risk designations of the prevention of contamination from the premises that we provide in the food code, specifically related to toilet rooms. And FDA, well, let me back up for a minute. The risk designations are core, priority, and priority foundation. And the higher risk would be the priority items, and the core and the priority foundation items would be next. They are in support of the priority items, and then we have core items. And just for an example, a priority item means a provision in the code whose application contributes directly to the elimination, prevention, or reduction to an acceptable level hazards associated with foodborne illness or injury, and there's no other provision that more directly controls the hazard. So when you see a P in the food code, that's the highest priority risk designation. It does include items like with a quantifiable measure so that we can show control of hazards, such as cooking. You have a temperature for cooking or reheating or cooling. And then the priority foundation item means a provision in the code whose application supports, facilitates, or enables one or more of those priority items. So, for example, a priority foundation item includes an item that requires where you do specific purposeful actions or equipment or procedures by industry to attain control of those risk factors. And then a core item is, looking at my food code here, a provision in the code that's not designated priority or priority foundation. So it usually relates to like general sanitation, operational controls, sanitation, standard operating procedures, those types of things. And so in this case, with that, we re-evaluated the risk designations and supported this recommendation based on what we know now from our norovirus risk assessment. So we changed it from a core to a priority foundation. Some of the information we learned from our norovirus risk assessment is of how norovirus can be spread through aerosolization and surfaces. And so the sections indicated on the slide specific to toilet rooms were updated from core to priority foundation. In terms of raw animal foods, we've made a change in 3-401-11. This is the cooking section. It was revised to align with the FSIS labeling requirements. Again, dealing with mechanically tenderized beef products, specifically in subparagraph A2. So we removed the terms mechanically tenderized and injected and replaced it with the term non-intact meat, as that term describes meat that is undergone tenderization or injection. This next change we made is a new one. This is a new section in the code, and it speaks to manufacturer cooking instructions. It's 3-401-15. The new paragraph A addresses situations when the commercially packaged food bears a manufacturer's cooking instructions, such that you're going to have commercially packaged food. It's going to bear that manufacturer cooking instructions, and it may say something like shall be cooked according to those cooking instructions, and that's how it has to be cooked before use in a ready-to-eat food or before it's offered in unpackaged form for human consumption. And the only exception to that is unless that manufacturer's instructions specify that the food can be consumed without cooking. Think of frozen peas or carrots that may be used for a salad bar. So you want to check the package first to see if it needs to be cooked prior to putting it out on the salad bar. The new paragraph B addresses disclosures of information that, the new paragraph B addresses disclosures or information provided by the manufacturer that the food has not been processed to control pathogens. So the food should be cooked according to a time and temperature appropriate for that food. And right now we have an FDA regulation, and when I say that, I'm thinking of the current good manufacturing practices, hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls for human food, good manufacturing practice. It's 21 CFR Part 117. That allows a food manufacturer that produces a food, such as a spice or a seasoning blend, that has a known or reasonably foreseeable hazard, let's say salmonella, to provide that food to a commercial, retail, or food service operation without first processing the food to control that hazard, as long as the manufacturer discloses, i.e. provides information to that commercial retailer or that food service operation that that food has not been processed to control the hazard. And retail and food service operations really need to be aware that food that bears such a disclosure, so that's the information provided by the manufacturer, that it must be processed, for example, by cooking to control the hazard before making that food available to consumers. So both paragraphs in this new section heighten awareness of those requirements of these food items should an establishment purchase and serve them. And we also made additional cross-references. 3801.11 is the highly susceptible population section, and in paragraph C of that, we address that such foods may not be served or offered for sale in a ready-to-eat form to a highly susceptible population. Think a nursing home, hospital, or to we also have in the new food code, food allergen, some major food allergen notifications. We know every year millions of Americans have allergic reactions to food, and although most food allergies might cause relatively mild symptoms, some food allergies can cause severe reactions that really are life-threatening. And there's no cure for food allergens, and strict avoidance of the food allergens and early recognition and management really of allergic reactions to food are important measures we know that can really prevent serious health consequences. And so the CFP has also been engaged on allergens, food allergens, as issues are brought before them. And they recommended that FDA add consumer written notifications of major food allergens in unpackaged food in the food code. And FDA agreed this is an important issue, and having those written notifications in place as a measure to inform consumers, that really is just a step in a direction that can assist consumers so that they can make informed decisions, and that can help prevent unintended illness and death. And the Conference for Food Protection for their 2020 cycle, they recommended that FDA amend our subparagraph on food labels, paragraph 3602.12c, and it was to include that the major food allergen label information requirement for consumer self-dispensed bulk foods. The decision to amend the food code to include this requirement is based upon that issue recommendation from the conference, and it's not based on requirements within FALCPA, which really covers prepackaged foods, packaged foods, I should say. And then throughout the code, we've made changes and updates in regards to the 21 CFR 117, the current good manufacturing practices. It's the 117 is the new standard upon which good manufacturing practices are in place, and it used to be 21 CFR 110. And while it's not officially sunsetted, it's no longer really cited for compliance and enforcement. And this change really just brings the food code up to date with the current regulatory structure that's in place. In Chapter 5, we included information where we amended the 5202.12. And this section, this again was a Conference for Food Protection recommendation. They wanted us to amend the food code so that we could indicate the hand sink, that the hand sink be equipped to deliver tempered water. And we did an evaluation. We looked at various definitions of, well, what do you mean tempered water? What is it? How is that used? And we reviewed the International Plumbing Code and the Universal Plumbing Code, the UPC, that's used throughout various states. And we also reviewed ASTM standards for efficacy of hand wash soaps, and determined that setting a minimum temperature that must be delivered by the hand washing sink would really be the best course of action for compliance and enforcement, and indicated that the temperature aligns with the International Plumbing Code, what they say is tempered water, the standard that they use for tempered water. So rather than include a range, and that actually included a range from I think it was 85 to 110, we let the minimum temperature set it at what that hand wash sink would need to deliver at the very least. So this section was amended to revise the paragraph A in this to reduce the water temperature from 100 degrees Fahrenheit to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And remember, this is the temperature the sink should be equipped to achieve. It's not a hand washing temperature. Many folks get that confused. So this is the temperature the sink should be equipped to achieve, not the hand washing temperature. And we do have an interpretation on this section available in our food code reference system. And when you do the search for that, I can also get that to Karen, that link. Use the keyword hand washing and it will bring up the interpretation for you. Let's look at chapter 6 with facilities. We all love our pets and our dogs, and with this change in the food code, FDA has made an adjustment so that, and again, this came through the Conference for Food Protection, and the code was amended to add a new exception in paragraph D to allow for pet dogs in outdoor dining areas where approved. And so each of the constituents at the conference, they really expressed concern at the growing number of establishments and jurisdictions which allow pet dogs in outdoor dining areas, and the need for appropriate oversight and regulation really of the conditions that were taking place. So while FDA, we do have concerns about allowing dogs in outdoor dining areas, we do think that providing some parameters around how that regulatory authorities can consider whether they should approve it or not, and under what conditions, that would be helpful for having uniformity, for having sort of ensuring critical areas of safety and sanitation are reviewed by those regulatory authorities before they give an allowance to that in their community or to an establishment. So we added language in the annex as well to help sort of cue the industry and regulators to the important hazards that really have to be mitigated if they're considering approving dogs in outdoor dining areas. And just as an example, we changed some of the other sections in the code. We amended cross-references and just sort of some of those formatting pieces that are in the code. To give you an example, so for food establishments, say that choose to allow pet dogs in outdoor dining areas, they have to be approved. I mentioned that. And there are public health concerns regarding that approval in those outdoor areas. And so when they develop a plan for approval, there are really some areas that they should consider to address hazards. And so, for example, the vaccination status of the pet dog, ensuring consumers are properly restraining and containing that pet and preventing the pet from serving as a source of contamination. They want to prevent access to wait staff or consumer food or utensils, linens, that type of thing. They really might want to have signage alerting persons to increased risk and designated areas for pet dogs. So those are some of the things that if they're preparing or serving food and water to dogs, if that's done, how is that going to be contained and handled? And really just maintaining that outdoor area, the exterior area, in a clean way. And under chapter 7, under conditions of use, I've talked about this a little bit. We removed, in this case, the reference to the RUPs, the restricted use pesticides. This section addresses conditions for use of the toxic material, poisonous or toxic materials, and we took the newly revised defined term, and it now includes restricted use pesticides. Therefore, in this paragraph, we were able to remove the term restricted use pesticide here because it's encapsulated in the poisonous and toxic materials definition there. The intent of this section is that all poisonous or toxic materials, regardless of whether they are RUPs or not, adhere to the conditions of use and how they should be applied. That's listed in this section. So adding the RUPs to the definition really clarifies that they are in fact poisonous and toxic materials, and that it applies to, and that this section applies to all poisonous and toxic materials. And in this 720311, this section only listed food as an item prohibited from storage, transportation, or dispensing from a container that previously had been used for storage of a toxic or poisonous material. And expansion of this section to prevent cross-contamination of equipment, utensils, linen, self-service items, you see them listed on the screen, or single-use articles, which may also be stored in these types of containers, really improves public health protections. So while storage of these items was not explicitly listed in a previous version of the food code, FDA would not condone that practice. And so addition of these items to the list within the code provision provides clarity that no item should be stored in containers previously used for toxic materials. We made some changes in the references in Annex 2, updating web links and titles. So this was just general formatting that we did. And then in the public health reasons, we also amended throughout. So we added or revised public health reasons where needed. For example, where we added a new codified language or revised something. And some of the examples include we've updated rationales that are tied to the definition of the TCS food. We added the new public health reasons for the newly added section I mentioned on manufacturer cooking instructions, as well as public health reasons for the molluscan shellfish provisions. And we do have a summary of changes document, and you can see a full list of the changes and updates to Annex 3 in the summary of changes. Annex 4 speaks to management practices. Active managerial control is what the operator will do to recognize and control the hazards and the risk specific to that operation, the types of food and the types of processes that are going on. And it's measures that they take to control those hazards and risk within the facility. So if you as a manager in that facility, if you are the manager, you would be taking measures such as that. And so we made a few updates to Annex 4 to correspond and align with updates made to codified sections. We made some changes in Annex 7 as well. These are the model forms and guides in the document. Let me back up for a minute. One of the changes we made in table 2A and B, common chemical hazards at retail, we added sesame in the associated box. Sesame was added as the 9th major food allergen. And we also removed columns that were associated with the flavor enhancer MSG, monosodium glutamate. The decision to remove MSG as a chemical hazard was due to FDA's extensive review of MSG in the 1990s and its public position affirming the safety of MSG. So there's overwhelming scientific evidence that supports MSG as a safe food ingredient, and FDA currently classifies MSG as GRAS, generally recognized as safe in the CFR, 21 CFR 182.1. So going back, the model forms and guides, we've updated some of the corresponding information in the inspection report. And you may say, well, what does that have to do with me on the inspection report? But this is a guide that when an inspector comes into a facility that you're managing, they're looking for how you're operating, looking for you to work with them, to show them how you're maintaining the risk, controlling the risk within your facility, and how do you recognize all of the risks that are potentially there with the type of operation you're running. And so this inspection guide gives some direction on how to review things, how to market. So it's an important part of the food code. And we amended, for example, under item 1, supervision, we included an additional compliance status as not applicable to address some of the new exception that we've made into chapter 2 in the food code. With number 6, proper eating, tasting, that refers to tobacco, and we amended the molluscan shellfish part. In the instructions for that, I'm sorry, this was the inspection report I was talking about in Form 3A. Guide 3B deals with the instructions for marking. the food code inspection form. And so these changes are reflected either in the title of it or sometimes the descriptive text, the type of categories. And so, for example, I'll just go through some of these. In number 1, it says the person in charge is present, they demonstrate knowledge, and they perform duty. So we included any additional compliance status of not applicable, where that may apply, or if the person in charge is present, they have to demonstrate that knowledge to all applicable codes, and we updated it to the redesignated paragraphs that were added. In terms of number 6, that speaks to proper eating, tasting, drinking, or tobacco product use. And we're updating that title again to that tobacco products. One thing that may be of interest to you is item number 11. It was labeled approved source, food obtained from approved source. We actually renamed the title to more appropriately state food from a source that complies with law. And we amended item number 11 to make an editorial change, really to clarify it for the in and out. How would you mark this in? What constitutes as being out of compliance? That food must be obtained from sources that comply with law. Sometimes people got confused around, they thought the terminology was approved source. And what the food code has in its definition is just the term approved as a defined term. So that's just one example that you may find interesting. And then in 14, it's about the records with molluscan shellfish, and I've already talked about the food separation and protection. And then the last one, 18, deals with that proper cooking instructions, those new manufacturer cooking instructions. And I will stop there. I feel like I've been talking too much. I'll turn it back to Karen. If there are any questions, I'll entertain those questions.
Thank you so much, Glenda. We do have a couple questions here. Will these changes be reflected on the NRFSP Serve Safe curriculum and the final exam as employees attend Food Safe Manager certification classes?
I would expect that they would. FDA, NRA does that part of it. And so we've communicated the changes. We've been meeting with industry partners, other industry partners as well. But they actually control when changes to the exam may go into that exam. But we provide from FDA the food code, say these are the changes, and then they work within their own mechanisms for updating those documents.
Okay.
So we would hope that they would.
Thank you. And then we have a question here. Do we need to allow service dogs in retail food locations, or do we need to exclude them?
Service animals can be allowed. They already are allowed in a facility, certainly not in the back of the house per se. For that, but if a customer enters and they need a service animal, that would be allowed. They may need it for sight, for hearing, or for other reasons. So yes, service animals would be allowed.
Okay. And then is the entire updated FDA code that you were speaking about available on the website link here on your question and answer page? Right here on this last slide.
You can actually, the bottom on the website, the retail food protection, yes, it is there. If you go there, you'll see, a whole volume of information that I'm sure you'll be interested in. We have industry and tools and training opportunities and information there. But if you want to go directly to the food code, you can go to www.fda.gov/food code. And it will take you directly to the food code webpage.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like we have no further questions. So we'll go ahead and wrap up today's webinar. On behalf of the IDDBA, I'd like to thank Glenda and the FDA for today's informative session. If you are interested in presenting a webinar or have a topic that you'd like to see presented, please contact the Education Department at webinars@iddba.org. Applications are still open for the IDDBA Growing the Future Scholarship. Please go to iddba.org under the Professional Resources tab to apply. The IDDBA Leader Certificate Program is now taking applications. To take on the challenge and harvest the possibilities, today's leaders need to move beyond management to a keen understanding of high-performing leadership behaviors, their own strengths and areas for growth, and the business context where their own organization can meet the passions of the customer. Join a cross-section of industry peers in our exciting, engaging, and interactive journey with top-ranked faculty and industry experts for a 3-day program, September 26th, 27th, and 28th at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. Visit iddba.org under Professional Resources tab for more information. Are you coming to IDDBA 23 in Anaheim, June 4th, 5th, and 6th? Be sure to save the date. So thank you everyone for attending and for your continued support of the IDDBA, and have a great rest of your day.